Hello again, and welcome to my beginner's guide for Reverse 1999. I set out a poll a while ago asking what you guys would like to see first from this, and you guys chose early team comps. And what I mean by early team comps is combinations of units that will help you get through the game, or the early game at least. Now, Sonetto is one of the best early supports you can get. She is very basic in her kit, but because of that simplicity, it's easy to understand her kit and work with. Now, I completely forgot that this existed, because it's just been so long, but you get a selection of 6-star characters, which are the more rarer characters that you get from polls. The selection of 6-star characters opens up further and further as you get through the story, which there obviously some have more value than others. The units that I would most recommend for this selector would be units like Eternity, Melania, Jessica, Medicine Pocket, and maybe NN Lee. Units that I would personally recommend to select from this is Eternity. She has good damage output, especially for early game. Melania, she's a good DPS to start with, and if you have her later game, if you unlock her Euphoria, which is just an upgrade to her base kit, if you use that, she becomes more of a support. Now, Jessica starts to fall off a bit more towards the mid to late game, but her damage output is actually really good for what she is. And Medicine Pocket is just a decent healer. For now, I'm not going to touch this, I'm not going to select anyone, but this is always an option. Now, this selector item does not expire, so do not feel like you need to rush through the story to get to a certain point to unlock these characters, because it will always just be in your inventory until you do make a choice to select a unit. Alright, it's been a few minutes. I'm just going to be throwing out some polls to some random banner and see what I get. I'm going to aim more towards this Ripples banner, because there are still some good units that I could get from this. The first 6-star that you get from this, it will be the character that you select. Alright, I got a couple units that I wanted, and some of them that I wanted to go over. And I got one of the better supports in this game. Now, I'm not going to go over any 6-stars in this, so Assault's probably going to have to be on the back burner for now. However, I do want to go over some of the units that I did get, and start to switch over to my other account to go over some other units that I am gonna try and get in this account. Now, when it comes to when you're pulling units and making your team, I would say that this game much more prefers that you have horizontal investment over vertical investment, which usually means that horizontal investment, it wants you to have a wide array of characters, which would usually mean like you have an entire team over the vertical investment, which is one heavily invested character. Now, not to say that the duplicates of characters are bad in any way. They're really good. It improves any specific part of their kit, depending on what portrait you have. But, as I said, this game much prefers that you have an entire built team over one built character. Now, Bakorn Bloom is one of the best early DPS options, mainly because of her ultimate, which attacks enemies for a lot of damage and also controls them a bit, makes it so that they can't attack with their ultimate. One of her other utilities is her debuff card, which just makes enemies take more damage. Now, as you upgrade her, she starts to deal more damage to enemies with debuffs, just in general debuffs. If you see stats down, negative status, or control, that's just general debuff, any debuff in the game. Offgoose is another unit that I would recommend for early game players. He's a support that is somewhat like Sonetto, but he does a lot more. If you look into his kit, he gives buffs to the allies in front of him and also dispels. His buff card gives cure to allies behind him, which is just passive regen for not that long. But he also gives damage heal, so if the ally attacks an enemy, then they would heal a certain percent of that that damage that they dealt. I've switched over to my main account, so I can show you some units that I would recommend. There are 3 categories of units that I'd like to recommend. That being just DPS, support, and healer. For DPS units, I would actually recommend Charlie. She is a generally pretty strong 5-star character that you can use. She does a lot of damage if she has any buffs on her. And with her ultimate, she's able to dispel any buffs from any enemy that she attacks. Another DPS that I would recommend is Blondie. She just does straight up damage with her attacks. She is just very basic in her kit, and she just deals damage. Now, I wouldn't entirely recommend Duncan, but he does have some pretty good damage to him. He is able to attack before enemies do with his counter. But as I said again, I wouldn't entirely recommend him. And 4 stars, we have Eric. She's another star Flatus unit, but she does actually deal some pretty decent damage for being a 4-star. With her ultimate, she's also able to do some decent damage, and she also inflicts disarm, which makes it so enemies cannot attack with attack incantations, but that doesn't prevent them from attacking with debuffs, counters, or anything like that. For another 4-star that I would really recommend is Eagle. She inflicts on a single enemy with the highest attack a debuff called Sense Weakness, which is a minus 20% reality defense debuff and a minus 20% crit defense debuff. There are two attack types in this game, reality and mental, which I will go over in my basic combat guide. However, it just means that any ally that does reality damage will be able to deal more damage with Eagle in the team. Eagle is also just a good DPS by herself. So if you look into her kit, she just has general debuffs, which makes it so that she'll do more damage to that enemy in Sense Weakness. And her other attack, it's just a general attack. Her ultimate is a really strong attack card. It attacks one enemy, which would usually you'd want to have the enemy with Sense Weakness to be attacked with it. However, it does a ton of damage, and the critical rate conversion will just make it so that if she has a really good crit rate, that it will deal even more damage. Now for supporting units, first of all, I would like to recommend Barbara. Her debuff card makes it so enemies can take more damage from mental attacks. She will also be able to provide a shield. And her ultimate gives a special status where it will give a card that can rank up cards next to it. And as you upgrade her, she'll be able to further expand her support. If she does not cast any cards, she'll give damage taken reduction, which just means that they'll take however much percent less damage. And after you cast her ultimate, she'll actually be able to recover her own HP as well as the HP for allies next to her. Name Day is a support that could buff allies that mostly rely on their ultimate, which are mostly 6-star characters. However, he's still a good support. He has a general attack, which pretty basic. However, at rank 2 and 3, it dispels counter statuses, which are not that common, so it's not really all too useful to rank up his cards. However, his buff card actually gives a damage bonus and damage heal. So if an ally with that damage heal were to attack an enemy, they would get HP back. His ultimate allows other allies to deal more damage with their ultimates for 3 rounds. He will also grant the ally in front of him the ability to cast their ultimate without any cost of AP, so you have pretty much a free card slot to use any card you want after that. As you upgrade him, after he does any action, ultimate, his buff card, just any of his cards, if he takes action, then the ally in front of him will also gain a buff called Ceremonious, which for every stack is a 3% buff to their ultimate damage. This buff is able to stack 100 times, which you'll probably not be able to get to the max stack. Necrologist has one use and one use only. After she uses her ultimate, She gives a buff to all allies that's called Prayer, which just allows them to be saved once, they don't die, and they'll also be able to heal a bit. Now moving on to healers, we have Yenisei right here. She is able to upgrade her own cards, which will be able to give them extra effects. With her healing card here, she's able to heal one ally. If it's upgraded, she's able to heal a second ally. It's not selectable, it's just based on how much health that they have left. And it also comes with the drawback of not being able to heal nearly as much. Both allies that are healed will get a buff called Sturdiness, which is just a one-hit buff that if they are hit, goes away, but that hit will deal less damage. Her attack card here is just an attack card at rank 1. At rank 2 and 3, it becomes stronger, making enemies take more damage from mental attacks. Balloon Party is a bit of a weird healer. She mostly heals based off of missing HP. However, depending on the ally that you're using her with, that missing HP can be just a small amount, or it could be absolutely massive. Now, she has a weird gimmick that she has a sort of counter on her, that when she is attacked, she's able to reflect a certain amount of damage back to the enemy. It's not going to be that much damage. You're also able to give allies that counter too, but it's not going to last permanent as it is with... But overall, she's actually a pretty good 5-star healer. There aren't any 4-star healers, however, there is a 3-star healer that I would actually recommend, and that is La Source. Her cards are straightforward, she's just able to attack, heal, but her ultimate is actually pretty good, and it just takes away Moxie from any of enemies that it's attacked by. It only attacks a single enemy. As you upgrade her at the start of the battle, up to 3 rounds, she will inflict a debuff called You Wish, which makes them deal less damage and take a bit more damage. Unfortunately, that doesn't last very long. Now, there are a few units that I would recommend not using or staying away from. Now, like most games, there are definitely some units that aren't as good, so here are a couple units that I would recommend staying away from or not putting as many materials into. Some units don't have any utility or strengths inside any stage, even in early game. One of the units I would say would be Onion. She is not that good at all. Bunny is also not that strong of a unit. She doesn't deal that much damage, and even for any part of the game that you're in, just any 5-star is able to outdamage her, and she's just not that great. And the last unit that I would not really recommend using is Ulu. She just isn't that great. Even when she came out as a support to another DPS called Spathadia, she just has never been that good, and you're better off just going to the Ripples banner and just grabbing Assault. Now, when putting teams together, you usually have a team of 4 or 3. Most early game content, up to mid-game, has just the 3 slots available. For stages with bosses, it opens up to have 4. Now, in stages that have the 3 slots only, the 4th slot is usually just reserved, so if any of your units fall in battle, they will be able to take that spot and do whatever role that you have assigned to them. Now, when making a team, you generally have the DPS spot, the support spot, and the healer spot. Most stages in the early game, especially through the story, aren't that hard. So if you're upgrading your characters decently enough, you're generally able to get through it without a healer, mostly because you get out damage before any of your allies fall in battle or before you lose the stage. If you guys have any specific questions or anything you might want to learn a bit more about, please feel free to ask down below. I'd love to answer. So for now, I would like to conclude this here. Thank you very much for watching.